Hi, I'm Renu Razdan. I'm on the Chai with Champs podcast with Ritika. I am so excited and let's get into it.
Welcome to the Chai with Champs podcast. This is the center stage for South Asian cinema. I'm your host, Ritika Agrawal, and I'll be sitting down with Oscar-nominated producers, award-winning directors, actors, composers, influential film critics, and more who are shaping the future of South Asian cinema. Chai with Champs is sponsored by Sunblue Sound, a visionary audio production company that specializes in post-sound for visual media. This episode is sponsored by Indie Wild. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Chai with Champs podcast, Season 3. I'm here with the gorgeous Renu Razdan. Please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be here? I'm so excited to chat more with you.
I'm really grateful to be here. It's always a pleasure to meet another creative in the industry and also be invited to just share just kind of what the growth has looked like so far in the journey, and also learn from you and support you and know that you are bringing a lot of different creators in this space on multiple different tracks of their journey. So it's just great to be here, and hopefully I'll get something out of it too.
Oh, thank you so much. That means truly a lot, and thank you for coming out. Before we get started, I always love my guests to introduce themselves. So can you tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Renu. I am an actor and a filmmaker. More recently, in the last couple of years, I started making short films in the independent kind of side of this business. I've been an actor for a little under a decade, and my alter ego is that of a Silicon Valley professional. I have an entire career behind me in the tech space, and I'm just a proud member of the South Asian diaspora who wants to tell their stories.
I'm so excited to dive more into that.
Yeah.
Really going back in the days when it all really started, before the pageants and the films. Can you tell me more about who Renu was and what drew you towards storytelling?
Yeah. I grew up in a Kashmiri American household, I guess you should say. My parents are, they're from India. They grew up in Kashmir, and they moved to Delhi, or many members of my family moved to Delhi, and my parents in particular, they came here for their broader studies. And so I grew up in a joint family household. So at any given time, my grandparents from both either my dad or mom's side were with us, sometimes all four of them, sometimes just one set of them. So I grew up in a house of family members who had a sense of longing for their original homes in Kashmir. And so oftentimes what that looked like was sharing stories of what was with me, trying to find themselves in story from what was available in film, even if it was Bollywood film or cultural shows available to us at the local temple or community center. And at the same time, because, I was a child of immigrants, there was also this huge impetus to be a high performer and prove yourself and sense of belonging as a minority in Indiana. So, I was one of very few brown girls growing up in school. And it was this interesting dichotomy of wanting to be a high performer at school academically, because that's kind of what was deemed as like how we earn our stars and stripes in this country, for my parents. And at the same time at home, it was like this overindulgence of just culture through stories, whether it's personal stories from my parents and grandparents or the stories that we could access through satellite TV and film. So it was interesting. I think, if anything, I felt like my wires were always crossed, and I felt like I was living like multiple realities. And what used to feel like a reason for me to feel like I don't belong, now I feel in hindsight is what makes me have so much more depth and dimension in the stories I get to tell because I was already playing different characters growing up. So now I get to just do that in my career.
I love that. And I love how relatable your story is also because I think it does start at home, right?
Yeah.
Especially for us immigrants, our stories that come, especially from our grandparents, are so unique because it's a different generation altogether. So I love that you shared that. And I think there's a lot of relatability factor in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You also spoke about your experience at Silicon Valley, which is two different worlds.
Yes.
So you moved from Indiana to Silicon Valley and then Atlanta to pursue acting and then finally LA.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to creatives who want to find a fitting, especially in the industry? And how do they kind of build trust in this creative field?
I would say lean into your curiosity, and simulate your reality as best as you can in the proximity available to you so that then you can make a plan, but also take a leap. Right. So for me, Silicon Valley isn't necessarily Hollywood, but it is in California. And I grew up in the Midwest. So because, I was conditioned to just be academically more inclined, I had gotten a degree that would set me up to have a successful job in Silicon Valley. And for me, I was curious about my storytelling future, if you will. So coming to California felt like, okay, at least I'm getting one step closer because, at least LA is a hop, skip, and jump away, even if that means being a weekend warrior and visiting over the weekend or taking a week off to maybe take a 1 week intensive class and to just kind of dabble. What it also means is you always have access to local community theater groups or local performance kind of culture, if you will. So always kind of nursing that curiosity through the means available to you wherever you are. So if I knew that, okay, I've studied to be, use my computer technology background to help me make a living in this world, then, what can I do beyond that in my free time to still nurture this curiosity? And at what point does that curiosity turn into a plan that you're willing to take a leap of faith against? And so for me, eventually that meant like those weekend visits to LA when I felt like the time was right, what transitioned into moving out here eventually. And then I was briefly living in LA before I moved to Atlanta, where I was realizing, because I'm someone who pivoted into this industry later on rather than, I just came on a bus when I was 16 and was like, I'm going to be an actor. I had to quickly recognize that I was, one, a late bloomer, two, a small fish in a big ocean in LA, and three, because I had this hustle, this sense of hustle because I had worked in Silicon Valley and I understood what entrepreneurship is like and I understood what, just type A, technology executive leadership is like. I had this sense of where can I be a bigger fish? And so in Atlanta, I just felt like maybe I can be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. I was wrong about the pond part. Atlanta and the Southeast has a huge film and TV industry. I was right about the fact that at the time, there was less of a dense community when it came to my archetype or my what I might get cast as. And at the time, the term, ethnically ambiguous was thrown around a lot. And so I just knew that they might not have as much local talent. So again, strategically, I was hoping to really become a bigger fish, if you will. And the value of that is in Atlanta, that's what I experienced. I had a much higher volume of auditions. This was pre-COVID. The Atlanta community at large was a self-tape community already. And in LA, it was much more of an in-person audition community. And so what that helped groom me for now in hindsight was when post-COVID, everything went almost globally, like first touch is a self-tape basis. I was ready for that. So the irony is when I got to Atlanta, I did book my first network credit. I was on Dynasty, which was on the CW, and I was going out for a lot of auditions, but those, I guess, more prestige roles were still being booked by Los Angeles or New York actors. And things are constantly shifting in this industry, but what it at least meant for me was I want to be in a creative capital so that I can be doing what I need to do to be one of those booking actors.
Yeah.
So I felt like I treated it almost like a business trip, if you will. It was like a 1.5 year long business trip where I'm setting up shop. I'm expanding my global footprint. I got to play the bigger fish in out there by having that volume of auditions. And I got to see what that was like because I didn't have that volume here in LA.
Yeah.
And then when I came back here, I could use what I had learned, the bookings that I had gotten, and utilize that to hopefully, have a bigger footprint here. And eventually, post-COVID, I found that in the indie community space. So long story less long, I'll just say that moving around is something that I think, it's just about leaning into that curiosity against a strategy that you think best serves you based on how you're cast, what kind of volume of opportunity is available for you in terms of where you are at. And then also, if you have the means to do that in terms of also, what that looks like for your lifestyle.
I love that you broke it down so beautifully and kind of like drew a roadmap of your own journey, but also for someone else who's thinking about what they should be doing, right? I love that you were strategic. And I think I do sense a whole type A energy here that you kind of executed through your way. Talk to me more about when you took that leap of faith and were like, nope, this is it. I'm going to be an actor full time. I'm going to have to leave my Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
My Silicon Valley job. And like, how did that come to be?
Yeah, I think there's, it's if we look at even the quote unquote A-listers of today, they have either their own like brands, either like an alcohol label or, Jessica Alba had like Honest Company. Like everyone has different ways in which they income stack and build wealth. And I think that I have realized that we are multidimensional, and owning your career does not mean that you only are that one thing. Yeah. And I used to feel like I've used this reference. I used to feel like you have to be Clark Kent and you only get to, don your superhero cape when you go for your audition, but you can't tell anybody about it until you've really made it. Mm-hmm. And until you have a deadline article about you, and you have to just kind of like have your money job, and you can't say you're this actor or you're this director or whatnot until you have proven public success. And so I really romanticized this sense of I just want to like be done with the full-time working and just be full-time acting. And COVID, what it did was open up this access to remote work, especially if you are coming from a corporate job, which not all artists are. So that, that's something that I'm very grateful for, because I could transition a lot of that financial stability into remote work, which used to be problematic because you have to either say you have a doctor's appointment or an emergency, or you got to pick up a family member from the airport. And meanwhile, you're like doing your makeup in the car and getting to an audition. But that's not the case anymore. And so I would say, one, knowing that I could use the skills that I have that have been able to help me have financial stability and apply those with my own, with control over my time. That was a big kind of moment for me to kind of consider, like, what does this mean for me in terms of how does this change how I apply my bandwidth as an actor? Number two, looking at it in terms of a contracting or consulting model and seeing, is that a viable option? Because then again, control the controllables. If you're able to control your bandwidth, then when you want to dial up your income stacking versus dial down because, I'm going to take 2 months and do this play and I want to be focused 100% of the time. No actor is on set 365 days a year. No, like, doesn't mean like whether you're Shah Rukh Khan or, just starting out, that's not the case. And so I think that is a myth that you have to be like full-time one thing or another. What I will say is, since being able to work remotely and pick and choose when I want to dial up, how I'm using my tech background for income or not. It has taught me about how I want to approach kind of compartmentalizing what I need as a creative. If I need to map out like in my calendar certain days or certain blocks of hours as a creative to get work done, and also how to plan for when I'm going to be booked out for something that I've booked. So I think it wasn't necessarily a moment of time, but it was multiple factors that helped me take more control, kind of like an entrepreneur, if you will, around how I want to set up my success in the future as an actor. I'm not someone that has maybe what would be looked at as like a huge roster of public success. I'm someone that if anyone can learn anything from, it's about starting off and still being in the midst of that hustle. And so I would say like it wasn't a specific moment in time, but it was now I'm able to control more of the controllables, and I get to decide when I want to be a full-time actor for a week versus I'm going to go and make money for a week.
Yeah, no, I think that's so beautifully broken down and explained. Thank you so much for sharing that.
For sure.
How do you really just out of curiosity, like how do you decide what is that week of acting versus like what do you do to kind of be stable financially in this whole process of independent filmmaking? Because we all know it's not easy.
It's not easy. It's not easy. Yeah, I think we're all doing what we can to ultimately be employed in this arena, but it feels like it's a chicken and the egg. It's like you need to be a star before someone wants to pay you like one, right? So and then you feel like you're paying to play. Yeah. So I would say be aware that the pay to play model exists, but you have to find ways to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, and fiscally, like financially, because ultimately when you are a creative and you are coming at something as an actor, it is either going to be emotionally extracting or it's going to call upon maybe your insecurities, especially if you haven't had a roster of like 20, 30 credits, right? Yeah. So making sure you're coming at it in your best form is super important. So I think oftentimes people think that you romanticize the struggle and you're just gonna do whatever it takes. I'm not a fan of romanticizing the struggle necessarily. I think like the better you take care of yourself, the more you're going to be able to come and approach your creative choices. And so it's ironic. I'm an avid planner, but as a creative, you plan what you can, and then you allow yourself to be present. So I have typically found that in order to creatively thrive, I need longer chunks of time to approach any creative process, whether it's writing my film or whether it's prepping for a scene. So if I know that I have a goal of, say, getting my short film made, then I will map out like, hey, these are the blocks of time that I need. And also evaluate like your performance in terms of like, do you do better in 2-hour stints of prep, whether it's rehearsal or whether it's creative writing? Do you do better with like 3 days where it's like, okay, Friday through Sunday, I spend my weekend treating it like a full-time gig and I block it out like 8 hours of work. I would say that we all have different life experiences that tell us how we work well. And so I've honestly leaned into the fact that I thrived as a corporate professional. So I've tried to break out my format as a creative in what is similar to a work day, where I like will map out my calendar to be like, okay, even if it's something I don't know how to do, I'll be like, I'm going to sit in front of my computer for the next 2 hours and treat it like I have a meeting with myself and figure this out. So use the structure that you have often found success in, really, like mine works for me because that's what my background looks like.
Yeah, no, it's truly a trial and error process. And I've had so many different conversations with different creatives, and I've also heard that the routine sometimes switches.
Yes.
You could like be super creative in the morning, and then suddenly 2 months later, you don't feel that same spark, and now it's like a night thing. So it's truly just about reassessing and pushing that reset button over and over again.
100%. You can't follow your mood. I say don't follow your mood, follow the plan. So if you're able to kind of, I think having creative goals is helpful. Not a goal like I want to book a series regular by the end of this year. Again, like goals that allow you to have a sense of control. So if your goal is, I want to write a script by the end of this quarter, then you can always reverse engineer that in some form of structure of like, okay, I commit to writing 2 pages a day. Oh, I tried that. That was really hard for me. Maybe I need to change that to 1 page a day. Or like I did really great creative work first thing in the morning versus, this didn't work for me. So it is a trial and error process, and then making sure you're always retrospecting so that you're like, okay, I learned new data is telling me how I can make this better.
Absolutely. Now, during this process, you moving different cities, you also found your partner.
Yes.
Which I think is so beautiful to see because you guys are not just supporting each other, but you're truly creating work and building something together. Congratulations, by the way, on A Newlywed Story.
Thank you.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
Talk to us more about what really goes into that kind of a collaboration, and how do you surround yourself with people that truly support you so you can grow and flourish in this creative industry?
Yeah, I think partnership where there's mutual growth in this industry is so important, whether it's, you find your village or, in my case, I happen to have a life partner who is also an actor. And so that is, a beautiful way in which we understand each other on another dimension when it comes to our career. But I think that can also be found in friendship. You have examples like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck from Good Will Hunting. And you have, those creative collaborations, if you will, through just those friendship romances as well. And so I think we have a lot of examples of this, but at the end of the day, it's just about finding someone, whether it's in a professional collaboration or even if there is more of a personal kind of relationship there that is thematically aligned with what you want to achieve in a given story. In my short film's case, A Newlywed Story that you mentioned, it happened to be a story, a romance, a rom-com, if you will. And so naturally, if I am seeing that myself and my partner, we're going out for roles, but none of those roles are necessarily the maybe stereotypical leading man or woman that might be seen in a more romantic light, and I happen to be in a romantic partnership with this person, then I found it advantageous to write characters for us. It was also inspired by a story that I had lived through. So as a first-time filmmaker in that situation, I just wanted to write something I knew. And so was it a little bit of art imitating life and vice versa? Yes. But I would say, in taking the role of the writer, the director, and the star of this project, one thing that was great about having Rajiv, my husband, as part of the ride was kind of identifying what his role was and what my role was, and then making sure that we both felt like we could separate in terms of process in those given roles, and making sure that we have creative ownership and a sense of kind of agency in our choices. And our collaboration in that project was really of 2 people who are co-stars with one another, and him empowering me to go off and make the choices I want to make as a director and make the choices I want to make as a writer, and him honoring that versus it feeling like just because we happen to be under the same household that everything needs to be a shared process. So I would say that is true for whoever you collaborate collaboratively work with. Oftentimes when we're coming up, we want to work with our friends anyways. So whether that friend happens to be a romantic relationship or just, your girlfriend or your guy friends or whatnot, knowing where you have those healthy boundaries is really important. For us as actors, we coached separately, we rehearsed separately, and then we rehearsed together so that nothing felt completely homogenized. We made sure that this wasn't it wasn't Rajiv and Renu Newlywed Story. It was a film about two characters who had different names, who lived different lives than us. And we're also showing a character arc within a span of 14 minutes, which means it's not just show up and act like yourselves, because it's not a biopic, it's not a documentary. So making sure that we also approach this like we would approach any other project, where we are looking at how are these characters similar to us, but also how are they different from us? What range are you going for that's not necessarily what Renu would do in her everyday life, because ultimately the things that we get to exercise that feel close to us or more accessible to us might feel like, oh, like I'm just doing this because this is what I know. Sure, but we're trying to simulate the job that we are booking in our future as well. So treating it as much like the job that we would have on a feature film, working with a different director, and matching that sense of professionalism was really important, because ultimately we're going to play just like we practice. So not treating it like a dress rehearsal, but treating it like the real deal was really, really important to us.
I love that, because you really showed what true partnership is and is supposed to be. A lot of people say, oh, don't mix love with work, right?
Yeah.
That's something that people often say. And so it's so beautiful to see both of you thrive on it, and treat it as a partnership, as a business model, and then know where your places are and then be romantically together as well. There's a different sort of beauty in it.
Yeah, I think like it's a different level of understanding one another.
Exactly.
And I think that if anything, if you have each other's best interest in mind, whatever version of that relationship looks like, when you care for someone, you're going to want to give that person their space and respect their process, And so it comes down to communication. And I would say, if anything, when you're working with someone that you love or you deeply care for, sometimes it's not harder, but I would say the responsibility to be sensitive to wanting to maintain professional decorum when you're on set or working together is greater, because it feels like it comes naturally when you're working with someone that you're paying, who you just take it at face value that like, oh, they're an established veteran in this business, so I'm going to treat them with respect, versus taking it for granted like, oh, like I can tell you whatever I want because, So,
I love that. And also kudos to you for not pursuing the traditional film school path and then still writing, directing, acting, and doing all of those things.
Thank you.
That's huge. Congrats again.
Thank you. I mean, I'm very blessed to have been given a lot of opportunities by directors who have gone to prestigious, decorated film schools. And I think if anything, that made me have this itch to find some sense of structure without necessarily going to film school, because I'm a multi-hyphenate who's really creating to cast myself in the light I want to be seen. And so I did find a multi-hyphenate coach that I felt like I saw myself in. She is also a actor, filmmaker, and she runs a community course hub called Indie Spunk. And so she had a course, Script to Screen, as well as a course called Crowdfund Hero, which really was helping structure just a bit of a model that other actors or first-time filmmakers could use, rather, to just set up, a shot list for the first time or a production budget for the first time. Understand like what are all of the different syntax and terms of like, the different shot ranges and roles and responsibilities and crew. So that definitely helped me. And I would say that kind of helped cure my sense of like I haven't gone to film school, if you will. So whatever that looks like for someone approaching this who hasn't gone to film school, just find what you need to feel like you think you know what you're doing. And then I also surrounded myself with people who weren't doing this for the first time.
Right.
So I felt like I had a safety net there.
That's
where
good.
I was the greenest person in the room. So I'm very lucky that although I didn't go to film school, I have a lot of friends in this business who have. So I'm constantly a sponge amongst them.
Yeah. And I was just talking about this in my previous episode where we said like your vibe attracts your tribe at the end of the day. So the people that truly believe in you are going to support you regardless. And then it takes a village to make a film come to life. And it eventually does happen. It truly is a reflection of the kind of work you're putting out and the kind of people you're attracting towards you.
Yes, 100%. I mean, we're living in a time where you can book a project from being a TikTok star or, it just, there's so many different channels. There's no one way.
Yep.
And traditionally, film school per se, most film schools don't necessarily have an acting track. So a lot of actors that go on to make their own productions, it's not like they have, so I think like, don't knock it till you try it and find what works for you.
Absolutely. Now there's a lot of noise in like just start, right? It takes so much time and effort and planning in making your first film come to life. It's not just the script, but it's the funding and getting the right folks on board. If you were to treat this as a masterclass, how would you describe and like what can you outline the steps that you took to make this film come to life? Before we continue with the episode, I want to give a huge shout out to our official show sponsor, Sun Blue Sound. If you've not heard of them already, they are an incredible audio production company that specialize in post-sound for visual media. They've worked on a range of projects, from ad spots to television series to films that have been streamed on Amazon, Tubi, and in film festivals across the nation. The coolest part, this episode that you're listening to or watching right now has been mixed and edited by Sun Blue Sound. Ravi, the owner, is a dear friend of mine, and I can vouch that he truly cares about his clients and embodies their tagline, engineering sound for visionary creators. If you're looking for audio mixing or sound design, reach out to them directly at team@sunbluesound.com. That's TEAM@sunbluesound.com. Now, back to the episode.
Oh, man. Yes, there's a lot that goes into it. I would say first and foremost, lean into your curiosity in terms of what's the story you want to tell. I had, before I started this, like just making short films, I've made 2 now, but before I started the journey of A Newlywed Story, I had actually been nursing a script for a series I've been pitching, and I knew it's something I wanted to sell. I knew that it was very result oriented in that sense of like, I want to pitch this. I want to get people to invest in it, yada, yada, yada. And I was very self-aware that there's like a result for that creative project. And I didn't have anything to show for myself in terms of what have I made before. So when I went after this first short film, A Newlywed Story, I felt this sense of pressure to deliver something that is, like you hear about films like, did they get distribution or did they go on to Sundance or whatnot? And I wanted to remove that pressure because I felt like if I come at this with this result, just like in acting, if you go after your audition trying to get it right or try to impress the casting director, then you're not really making a choice that's unique to you. You're trying to, well, if you go after any creative endeavor trying to get something right, it's not going to work. So I wanted to remove that pressure. And I wanted to just come at this as something like, I just want to make something that is true to me and that'll make me proud. So first and foremost is leaning into that curiosity. And I wrote A Newlywed Story because I had never gone out for a love interest role ever. And I grew up watching a bunch of love stories and I loved them. So I was like, I want to write a love story. And so first I just wrote it to give me a sense of, is there something here that I want to explore? After that, I I think because, again, I had been cast in a bunch of short films by other filmmakers who had gone to film school, I floated around to kind of get some advice from them in terms of what they thought. I got a lot of notes and then I didn't know what to do. So that's when I went and hired a coach who helped people kind of go after their first film. That's when I learned what it takes to get a film to go to film festivals. You know, typically films that are more than 10 to 12 minutes on an average don't get programmed very often. So then I had to take my 18-page script and I pared it down to 12 pages. So I started learning like, okay, what now will actually help get this film made and seen? Because again, I knew that I wanted to make something that will show me as an actor. So I wanted to make a film that will have a higher chance of going into the film festival circuit. I also looked at, in that length, I could identify how much budget I would need. So I looked at, okay, this is a 12-page script. It's going to need around 2 to 3 days of shooting. And that usually tells you what your budget will look like depending on your locations, anywhere from 5 to 10K. We were lucky to pare it down to 20K. So then I had a sense of how much money do I have to go and get crowdfunded. I had never campaigned for a film before. So I used Seed and Spark. We were lucky to campaign and get around 18K from our crowdfunding process. Yeah. And honestly, coming at it for the first time was a blessing because most people, like your friends, your family, people who aren't even in this business, when they see that you're going after something and you're creating the opportunity, they want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
So it was so great to see loved ones just pour into our film. I think first time is special, so I don't think that'll always happen.
Yeah.
But I realized very quickly, rather than feeling shy of like, I've never done this before, the more I embraced the fact that I had never done this before and was open and honest about it, the more people wanted to support me.
Yeah.
I felt like I needed to have someone meaningful attached, like a big director that would help come on and direct this film so that, again, I could just be the actor. I did have wonderful coffee conversations with directors I admire in this business, South Asian directors who have made some incredible work. And every time at the end of those coffee dates, they would just be like, Renu, you have you wrote this, you have a clear vision of what this is. Why don't you just direct it? And I'd always come home really bummed because I'm like, I want to be an actor and I want them to see that I can do this. And ultimately, one of my friends who happens to be a producer, she told me that if I would choose to direct this, she would help produce it. Long story less long, I just realized that taking ownership and taking authorship of what you want to do it's such a great experience to have, especially since I knew I had a series I wanted to eventually pitch, realizing like approaching this like a calling card that no matter where it goes and how it's received, I will be proud of.
Yeah.
And I get to treat as like a playground of wearing these hats for the first time is what's going to serve me. So I did then eventually take up my producer friend on her offer. And that's when I actually decided to direct it. But I didn't realize I was going to do that until halfway through the pre-production journey. And when you're crowdfunding, having ownership around why you're telling this, why you're doing it for the first time, what you're hoping to do with the project. I was honest about all those things. And I would say, if anything, that helped us get even more people to want to invest in it.
Yeah.
So after the crowdfunding, I would say the hardest part was post-production, because when it came to the shoot, I felt like, great, I'm in my happy place. I got to act, you know.
Yeah.
Post-production was a lot of learnings. The movie is truly made in the edit. I learned a lot. And like I said, I'm just grateful I was surrounded by people who were not doing this for the first time.
Yeah.
And that would be my advice to anyone doing this for the first time. Work with people who are not doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
And so that was my saving grace. And then again, because I had worked with a coach this entire time to help hold my hand, who had made several short films that had gone on to festivals, she just had some beautiful examples in her courses of templates to use in terms of how to approach the festival circuit, how to warm up those conversations. and prepare myself for what that would look like in terms of the festival journey. And and so here we are.
That's so beautiful. I think you created your own film school through that process. That's amazing.
I mean, if I have a lot of Google Docs, if anyone ever wants to like use them as a blueprint. But yeah, I think pick and choose from like the buffet of options out there in terms of resources, courses, and what have you. And then find people who are doing things that are thematically aligned with you. And
Absolutely.
then, whether it's a YouTube video or whether that's a coffee date with someone who's done something similar, and then figure out what you want to use and then go do it.
And I think it's also important to just like learn from different folks, right? I think no person has the same journey.
No.
And so like your journey could be so different from someone else's first film. Again, like you said, pick and choose, see what's working best for you, kind of use all of these different things that exist out there and make it happen. But I think like don't give up. At the end of the day, like just do it.
Yes, 100%. And if you're doing this for the first time, like I was lucky that I had acted in a bunch of indie films before. So I knew what it was like to also be at a film festival and watch different shorts. I had a sense of like what gets programmed, what doesn't.
Yeah.
Know your genre, know your content, consume content, consume short films or whatever medium that you're choosing to tell your story through. Get to know that medium.
Yeah.
Get to know where that medium is celebrated. Know those spaces so that then you know how to approach those spaces, or at least approach collaborators in those spaces. Or if you don't know collaborators in those spaces, find the friends that do so that they're making an intro. But like know that space, know the content in that space, and then go after making the content in that space.
No, 1000%. And I mean, you kind of were creating content in different creative ecosystems when you were working in LA or or I cannot say Silicon Valley for the love of my life. But when you were doing all of this, I mean, for independent filmmakers especially, do you think that there is a heavy need to be in LA to be doing the work? Or is there more power in kind of breaking the traditional norms and moving out of the power centers to create and make those films? What is your opinion and take on that?
No, you don't have to be in LA. It depends if there's more creative power in I think it's subjective in terms of whether there is more creative power in terms of where you do it from. LA will always be a creative capital. LA will always have legacy. LA will always have history. Look, if you're coming at this career path as an actor, follow your curiosity, know where the creative hubs are, and then if you have the means, explore those hubs so you identify what location serves you best from a lifestyle perspective, personality perspective, and opportunity perspective. You want to be on Broadway? Go to New York.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do improv? Spend some time in Chicago. You're not sure, happen to live close by to Atlanta, or you grew up in North Carolina, drive over to Atlanta. Look at what's available to you and then lean into that curiosity. I would say for the indie film community, as you asked more specifically, the power of indie cinema or indie storytelling is that you can truly just source what you need to independently, and you can technically do it anywhere. I would say for myself, I thrive in kind of sourcing energy off of the community available to me. And so, you are in LA, you are working with a dense population of creatives. So you're going to have access to a lot of people who are wanting to do this. So your options are going to be greater and arguably more competitive in terms of you're going to have a higher volume of talent. So that's great. Mm-hmm. So I would say also, like stay in LA, hashtag stay in LA is important to me. At the same time, it's going to be less competitive if you're doing it in a place in the map that like doesn't have a big filmmaker community. Is your learning curve going to be higher? Yes. Is it going to be maybe harder to find people who fit your exact needs and criteria? Possibly, because again, less densely populated. Yeah. Will you have to jump through as many hoops for, people to say yes? Maybe not, because, again, you're maybe not a small fish in a big ocean. You get to be a bigger fish in a small pond. So I think whether it's more powerful or not, it really depends. But at the end of the day, make the story wherever you need to make it for it to be the strongest version of that story.
Yeah.
And also like what you can manage and the resources you have. I think that's really just, stay as true as you can to the story you want to tell.
Yeah.
And then everything else comes after.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I also am a firm believer of everything you said. And I also think like after COVID, it's just allowed us to blur the borders almost. You can work with folks in India. You can work with folks in different parts of the country.
100%.
It's just, you choose what you want to do
100%.
at the end of the day.
100%.
Awesome. I'm going to move to one of my really fun rounds, which is called Spill the Chai.
Oh, okay.
It's 5 rapid fire questions, nothing controversial, just like fun things. And whatever comes first to your mind, you spill that.
Okay, cool.
Okay. First question. You're creating the Renu Film Fund for first-time South Asian women filmmakers. What's the one rule they have to follow to qualify?
It has to be, the whole production has to be females.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I love that. Second question. A South Asian stereotype you're tired of seeing on screen?
Oh my gosh. The subservient woman having to be exotic, but not just like you happen to just be attractive and like smart and not subservient. I feel like you're either like poster child smart doctor or like you're exotic and like on Slumdog Millionaire. Like, we can be full women who are flawed and also happen to be attractive and happen to have controversial career paths. You know, I want to see like people beyond just the tropes for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I was like, I knew
was
you
not
had
a rapid fire answer.
I was like, I knew you had a list on that question. What's one South Asian celeb who still hasn't replied to your DM or email, but you're manifesting that collab?
Oh my gosh. I don't DM too many celebs. Let's see, who have I DM'd? I have been very fortunate that like, this is going to sound like a flex, but
yes, I was like, wait, no, you're flexing right now.
I've usually gotten a response to my DMs. Who is a celeb that I haven't gotten a response from?
Wow, what a place to be in.
I mean, if they are truly a celeb or like an A-lister, I usually won't DM. I'll comment. Kerry Washington and Viola Davis, two incredible Black powerhouse actresses that I deeply admire, and I have DM'd them. But not, it was more like the comment was so personal in terms of what they might have posted that was so moving to me that I wanted it to be something that I DM'd them. And their PR teams or publicists can have a great time reading it.
I love that. The biggest fake it till you make it moment of your career so far?
Fake it till I make it moment. Being at Cannes Film Festival last year, you know, I was accredited as a filmmaker, but being there, I went to a pitch market and I pitched my series, and I just acted like I've done this before, and it was the first time I had ever out loud pitched my series.
Oh my gosh.
And I just like wore that badge like, oh yeah, I'm a filmmaker and I'm at Cannes for the first time and I'm such a big deal. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know nobody there. But you know, I think if you're in a space, you're there for a reason. And so other people think you're there for a reason. So own it.
Yeah, no, 1000% more power to you for doing that. Last question. If your journey had a Bollywood title, what would it be?
Renu Ki Zindagi.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
I love it. That was the rapid fire. It did very well. We're moving on to the last part of the podcast. And this is truly a moment for you to reflect on the conversation and then also give you a chance to reflect on your beautiful journey. And so if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self?
don't wait for the moment. You are the moment. Don't wait for the opportunity. Create the opportunity. And time is fiction. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now. So don't let your perception of time relatively, like what you think time equates to in terms of success, be the reason why you don't try.
Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
And with everything that you've done, you're creating, you're acting, you're making other voices and other people being seen on your platform. What's the legacy that you hope to leave behind?
That's a big question. I think I'm spending my life trying to discover my full sense of self and my truest sense of self as a woman. And I hope that along the way, I'm helping other women do exactly that. And through the roles I get to play, I hope that I help women feel like they are limitless in the roles that they can play in their actual life.
Mm-hmm.
And, whatever background they come from, they aren't afraid to pursue what they want to do and what makes them happy in this life.
Yeah, I'm sure your parents must be so proud.
They are now. They've come a long way.
Yeah.
It's hard to get behind unconventional creatives, but yeah.
Yeah, especially in South Asian families, right? You have a certain path for yourself, and then you're like, hey, I don't want to do that. Everything that I worked for my entire teenhood is not something I want to pursue. But actually, deep down, that's something you always wanted to pursue that.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
So it is a beautiful journey.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the last question for you, and truly this is about the podcast, right? It's about bridging the gap between the East and the West and giving South Asian creatives in cinema, specifically that main stage.
Yes.
What advice would you give to the audiences and the filmmakers to help bring South Asian cinema to center stage, not just from a genre or a region perspective, but truly from a global force of storytelling perspective?
I think we have to move from presence to power. I think that, as you said before, we exist across the globe. I feel like our storytelling communities are still pretty divisive in terms of, you have your Hindi cinema platforms or Bollywood players, if you will. You have members from the diaspora feeling like they might not even be being seen for stories that are representing people who grew up abroad, if you will. So I would say we have this beautiful, gorgeous presence across the globe, but I don't see as much cross-pollination in our collaborations together. I wish we didn't live in a world, like I said, where you have to prove that you're a star before someone feels like you're worthy of belonging to a project.
Yeah.
So I would like to see that sense of presence really help support more of the underdog players in this market. And also just seeing a larger pool of women, not just in front of the screen, but behind the screen in all the creative roles that we can take. I just think that's just by and large, something we have to change for women across the spectrum. But I definitely hope for that in our community as well.
Well, amen to that. That's a great way to wrap our conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey and being again in the 3rd season of the Chai with Chums podcast.
Thank you for such a thoughtful conversation. And I appreciate that you're helping creatives share their journeys. And I think anytime you get to hear yourself talk about your own journey, you I learned something out of it too. So thank you for holding space for me and people like myself.
Of course. Yay. I'm so happy. This is really good.
Yay.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Chai with Chums podcast. If this episode sparked something in you, go follow us, share it with your friends and family, rate it, and subscribe for more. I will see you next week where I sit down with another incredible guest that's bringing South Asian cinema to center stage.